Start the tape.
We're on.
Welcome everyone to the March 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Mill Creek City Council. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Cavallari, would you please lead us from council chambers?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vince. Naomi, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Bond,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Briles,
Here.
Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
With that, we move on to audience communication. Would anyone like to speak to the council tonight? Raise your hand, turn on your yellow hand, or verbalize your desire to speak. Hearing none and seeing none, we will move on to our presentations this evening. We are glad to be joined by our state representatives, Representative and Speaker Pro Tem, I believe, John Lovick, and newly elected April Berg. I'm not sure what our agenda is for the evening. Michael, were you going to take it from here? And
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We are honored to be visited this evening by both Representatives John Lovick and April Berg. It's my understanding that Mayor Pro Tem Vignal has worked with John Lovick and April Berg for their discussion tonight. It's my expectation that it's going to be open-ended and they're going to apprise us of the work they're doing on behalf of their constituents here in the city of Mill Creek.
Stephanie, you going to take it away?
Sure. It was my, as I talked to Representative Lovick and Representative Berg, I kind of envisioned this as an open dialogue where they could let us know what they're working on in Olympia. And we could also tell them what we are working on in the city and kind of ask questions of them. And if you will, I would take liberty and I would go ahead and tee up and ask Representative Lovick a question to get our conversation started this evening. So Representative Lovick, I think on the top of our mind right now, everyone is really curious what's going on with the Blake decision and how the legislature is handling that. And are you guys considering anything for our toolbox there? Oh, you're muted.
You know, we're selling a t-shirt in Olympia that said, "You're muted." So that's the hottest t-shirt for 2021. So let me just start out by saying good evening and thank you for letting us join you. And can I make just a brief statement? I always like to start with a brief statement. It'll be less than a minute if that's okay, Mayor Pro Tem. So my statement is this: 53 years ago, in his last public appearance before he was killed, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "We have some difficult days ahead." We've had something like 7 mass shootings in the last 7 days. And I don't know if you know this, but in Colorado, 10 people were killed. One was a 51-year-old police officer, Eric Talley. He was a husband, had 7 children. His youngest child was 7 years old. And so I just want to say this to this wonderful council: with the difficult days ahead, I hope that we can all show and continue to show peace, patience, and kindness. I absolutely love living in this kind city that I live in. So and if you will now tell me, you were talking about some of the things that we're working on with Blake. Well, you know, I'll start by saying this. Blake kind of caught us all by surprise because I don't keep up with all of those judicial things. I didn't even know it was in the running as far as what the Supreme Court was working on. But one of the things I know now is that we are working on some legislation. We have a group together, a lot of different people, mainly the attorneys and the policymakers, putting things together so that we could come up with some response to where Blake is. I spent almost 4 decades in law enforcement, and there's no question about it. We probably did a little bit and maybe a little too much with respect to drugs and drug possession. But I think the focus is going to be on getting the treatment that people need. because that's a huge area that I think we need to focus on. Not just let everyone just go, like unfortunately we will be doing, but get them the care and the treatment that they need, because most people that our police officers will arrest, they will eventually be back out in the community. So if we don't get them the care and the treatment that they need, that appears to be the focus that we're going on at right now. But what I'm hoping we don't end up with, Mayor Pro Tem, I hope we don't end up with just a whole lot of different policies from different areas. That's why for the last 2 days, I met yesterday with the police chief, your police chief actually, and then I met with the police chief from Everett yesterday, Police Chief Templeman. I met with the police chief today from Snohomish. We're just trying to figure out what is going to work for them. And I'm taking that information back to the policy leaders that are putting together a plan to address the Blake decision.
Thank you, Representative Lovick. I know Representative Berg is also working on many exciting new initiatives in Olympia as well. So Representative Berg, would you like to update us on what you're working on, and if there's anything that you think would be of utmost importance to us as a city?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. And thank you, the City of Mill Creek City Council. I wish I was about a mile from my house, sitting in your chambers, addressing you in person, but I know we're going to get there soon. I'm Representative April Berg, and I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm going to take a little longer in my introduction because I don't think a lot of you know me in this role. And so I'm not only a state representative, but I'm also a school board director. I'm also a mom that lives in Mill Creek, and I am the proud mother of 6 kiddos, 2 right here at Jackson, 2 that graduate at UW, and 2 that are currently at Western. Touch wood, because they should be graduating this year. So I'm a member of this community for a long time and love being here. I'm also the vice chair of finance in the House. And so there's a lot of really good legislation that's coming through, talking about tax reform and talking about tax policy and kind of reimagining it as we move out of this public health crisis. I'm on the local government committee, and of course I'm on education, because education policy is just one of my passion points. As far as what I'm working on this session, 3 of my big bills are really reimagining what it's going to look like when kiddos get back to school. One has to do with the free lunch copay that kids are charged. It's that 40-cent copay that if you're low income, you get charged to eat lunch. Well, right now, all of our districts are feeding our kiddos for free, and we need to keep doing that. So hopefully if this bill passes, there will be no reduced lunch fee. The other one is having menstrual equity for our young menstruating students. And so that will provide pads and tampons and period products in all of our educational settings for our young women. And then the third one is getting college and the high school credits for our 9th graders. It's kind of a small thing that's a big deal to a lot of the parents, especially in Mill Creek. And then lastly, I want to talk about a bill having to do with fire districts. And this one came directly from the folks that fight fires in our area, in our city. And they asked to have the commission be able to be expanded from 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 commissioners. Right now, per state law, you can only go from 3 to 5 or 3 to 7. Again, kind of weird, kind of funny, but we're fixing that so that our fire commission can grow as our city grows. So those are a couple of the things that I am working on, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Representative Berg. Councilmember Cavallari has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Representatives, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us this evening. I normally don't like to lob certain questions, so I'll refrain from a couple, but I do have one that's a concern to a lot of folks, and either one of you can feel free to take it. One of the biggest questions the public has right now is with gubernatorial overreach, with proclamation power and emergency declarations. So I guess I would put it this way. Is the legislature considering reworking or somehow modifying or restricting, rescinding, whatever word you want to use, the governor's ability to declare emergencies and just the power that goes along with that?
I'll take that one, Councilman Cavallari. It is good to see you again. We've known each other for many, many years. There have been conversations, and typically those conversations will come from the other side. And let's be real, it's a partisan environment that we live and work in. April and I are Democrats, and typically when those conversations start, they start from the other side. I've not heard any of those conversations come from our side because, you are a decision maker. And sometimes you have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the state. I always tell people that everything I try to do as a legislator, I try and do it based on my conscience, my district, and what's best for the rest of the state. The governor doesn't always have that prerogative. The governor has to do what is absolutely best for the state of Washington. And he has a lot of people working with him, and I trust his judgment. Do I agree with every single thing he does, every single, whether we should be at 50% or 25%, I can't say I do and I can't say I don't, but that's why he is elected governor. So I've not heard of any initiatives or any proposals to be able to force the governor to back down on some of the proposals that he puts in front of us. That's a fair question. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could jump into Rep. Lovick, and I do love serving with Rep. Lovick. We are a good team because we look at things from different perspectives. I will tell you, council member, our state is in a great position. We have a healthy state. We have a state that follows science. And as a result, I was just reading this morning in an Oxfam America report that we have the best safety net as we're coming out of this COVID environment. And as we're slowly reopening, our state has the best safety net of all 50. That's not an accident, right? It's because our governor and a lot of leaders were methodical and deliberate in keeping us safe, keeping us healthy, increasing consumer confidence, and now getting us on track to reopen our schools and businesses with a safety net that stayed intact. So thank you for that question. But yeah, there's no thought to doing things a different way.
And can I just say this, and April and I are not only good seatmates together, with wonderful friends. You got to remember, I love it when people tell us we're number one. 2 years in a row, we've been the number one state in the nation. And I don't know what's better than being number one, whatever that metric was. We're doing well. And I know this is a great city to live in. And I know you guys are appreciative of the great work that you do and the appreciation that you get from your constituents, because I hear it all the time. I would make this city number one in the state of Washington.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you, Rep. Lovick. Does somebody else have okay, Councilmember Steckler.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, first of all, Representative Lovick, Representative Berg, you two are always the first ones to thank us for our service. So let me throw it right back at you. First of all, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your service to the district. We really appreciate what you do for us. So thank you very much on behalf of everybody who's here on this call. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to just give you one right now, kind of a softball, but a very self-serving one. There's a lot of stimulus money that's coming our way, both to the city and to the state. I know our city is working on whatever we can to take advantage of that. Our city is looking at some very exciting new developments and some new opportunities. What advice, help, and guidance can you give us as our representatives to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get as much and make sure we don't miss out on any of the state stimulus monies that might be available to us? Do you have any advice for us, any guidance for us, any help that you can suggest?
So I'm gonna let April go with that one, because one of the things I served on the committee on committees, and I wanted to put the best person on that committee as the vice chair. And I'm glad that she's the vice chair of the finance committee. So April, I'll let you take that one. I'll pick up following behind you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rep. Lovick, and thanks, Councilmember Steckler, for that question. So the first thing I always caution folks with when we look at the new stimulus money coming into the state, coming into our local cities and counties, is that it's a one-shot deal. So this is not money to plan the next 10, 20, 30 years on. This is money that's coming in some ways to backfill, first, depending on the locality, in some ways to help gird up, in some ways to help protect. So as a city, just be mindful that this is not not something that can replace, let's say you're looking at, I know we've got some cities in our area looking at levies and they're saying, oh my gosh, well now we don't need to run a levy. We've got all this money. That's not the point of it. And there's actually some guardrails put on the money so that if you are looking at different tax cuts and whatnot, it's going to have to be offset by other things, not by stimulus money. So that's number one. But number two, when you're talking about qualifying and not missing out on it, the feds have been really clear about what buckets this money goes into, and we can definitely help you at the state level identify buckets of money. So if you're wondering, if a certain I don't know, I know you've got some new land in your possession now as a city and things like that. If something like that would qualify, just go ahead and reach out to my office or Rep. Lovick's office, and we can kind of identify or help you identify what buckets potentially could be available. But again, this is not for long-term projects. But it is very much specifically and methodically piecemealed out as to what the money should be spent on. The goal of this money is recovery and renewal and making you whole as localities. And so really be mindful of that when you're thinking about spending. I know at the state level, we've had a lot of like, hey, let's put tax policy by the wayside because all this money's coming in. That is not the point. We still have to be mindful of the future. We still have to be mindful of what happens in 10 years and beyond. But I think was your underlying question, Councilmember Steckler, about maybe some different projects that the city has going on and that you might be contemplating? Was that maybe where you were going?
Curious about the availability and guidance of what you can say is the best use of these funds.
Yeah, so I think what I'd love for you to do is think about it in two different buckets, right? So you've got the stimulus money coming in, and as a city, you've got some long-term projects and goals and ideas and surveys going out talking about what you might want to be doing. That's going to be a different bucket, right? So that now we're talking about capital projects and we're talking about local community funding. And so that's a different conversation that, again, both of our offices can absolutely have with you as you start down the planning process for those. But I would definitely not look at federal stimulus money as your first go-to source for those long-term projects.
And I think if I had the opportunity to just kind of say exactly what she said, that's what I would say. We had a long meeting with our chair of our appropriations, Representative Tim Ormsby, and he pretty much shared that with us. We're looking at a lot of dollars. Our revenue forecast was strong, but he told us that's one-time money that we're going to get. So we're gonna have to be careful. But if you guys need any help, any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. We work with individuals. A lady might call up and say she can't get this. We have somebody on it right away. So don't hesitate to reach out and we can direct you to our OPR staff and they can help you as much as you'd like.
I think the best suggestion you just gave me was let's identify those buckets of money.
Yep.
Let's do that first.
Yep.
And see what's available out there for us.
Yep.
That's a great suggestion.
And the other piece, just to just be mindful that the state, as you're doing your long-term planning as a city and you're thinking about projects, whatever stage they're in, just bring us in so we can help identify. We've got a list. I want to say it's about a 6-page list of different programs and grants and different ways to look at state dollars helping communities like Mill Creek become stronger and better. So we'd love to work with you on that process so that you're not tackling it alone.
And I'd like to jump in real quick because this kind of ties back into one of the main reasons why we also wanted to invite you in tonight, because as we start to talk about funding in the different buckets for projects, we are starting to plan long-term. As you know, with the Dobson Remillard Cook Church property and also on the Mill Creek sub area. And I know that Rep. Berg is familiar at least with that project because she was on our planning commission before. But we want to start planning long-term and bringing the two of you in and letting you know that this is where we're going and this is what we're working on. So as we start to identify as these projects move forward, and we can work with you to identify areas where we may need some additional funding and come to the state for some help in identifying those buckets and figuring out which grants that we may be eligible for those projects. So it's very important that we start to bring you in at the ground level as we're starting to plan those and keep you updated with where we are as we move forward in that process.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have any questions? Oh,
You guys are letting us off easy.
Michael.
Mayor Pro Tem, so long as there's no other questions from council, I really wanted to piggyback onto your comment. Recently, Mayor Pro Tem Vignal had provided us with the form to fill out regarding the needs, surveying what projects potentially the city of Mill Creek might have ready. And we really, if we come to the plate, we want to be able to swing and hit the ball. We have a number of projects in our capital plan that are in the concept phase. And we realize that in terms of looking at the criteria, a number of them is, can you complete it? Is going to be something to show for it within the funding period. And, we want to be transparent and say that right now it doesn't look like it. There's one potential playground that we are working very hard to move forward. But we want to make certain that we don't lose credibility by sending things prematurely to you. Mayor Pro Tem Vignal is strong advocacy on behalf of the city of Mill Creek. And basically, my gosh, you're kidding. We've got all these other cities asking for money. What do you mean we don't have anything? And really just by the sheer schedule of our capital plan, other than the one playground renovation, and we're working hard to pull that together, it's not likely that we'll have others in this period. But there are a number of them that are poised. And what we are sensitive to is that as we rebuild our engineering department under Director Mike Todd, formerly Councilman Mike Todd, we have a lot of exciting projects coming. So while we may not be rattling the tin cup in this cycle as vigorously as some of our neighboring communities, when we do come a-calling, we want you to know that we will have done our diligence, we'll have sharpened our pencil, and we will be prepared to talk about what it is we would need and greatly appreciate in terms of your advocacy on behalf of our city. So there was a dearth of requests coming from Mill Creek in this round. Please know that we want to make certain that when we do ask, we have our credibility of our administrative team and the support of our council behind us when we step forward. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much. And I just have to tell you something. If you ask for it, April and I, Representative Berg and I will advocate. I don't think I've had a seatmate that's worked harder at, getting projects, getting in front of the capital budget chair, getting in front of the appropriations chair. She works harder than anybody I've met, just simply saying, this is number one for her. And let me just give you a quick example. When I was first in the return to the legislature, I was out visiting Snohomish High School, and one of the high school students was in ROTC, wanted to walk me out to the ROTC building, which sits on the corner of D Street, and I can't remember the 6th. And she showed me the building, and this is the ROTC building. These wonderful kids, this ROTC program had been there for years. I said, well, what are you looking for? She said, we need to have this place remodeled. We put it in the budget. We got the money and had it remodeled. And if you go and look at the building now, a new roof inside, it looks inside and out. You have to ask for these projects. We did the same thing up in Lake Stevens with the playground in a neighborhood that, matter of fact, I took pictures of the park here in Heron Park to show them what our park looked like in Mill Creek versus what the kids had to play in up in Lake City. That park was repaired. You need to ask for these projects, and we will work to help you get them.
We appreciate that, Representative Lovick and Representative Berg. And that's part of the bargain. If we know that you're there going to bat for us, we want to make certain that we've got our act together and that we have all the paperwork and that we're ready.
Yep, we appreciate it.
And if I could just jump in, I know Mayor Holtzclaw has a question, but I just want to land this plane with you. And I want to let you guys know about some projects that are just exciting, and just so you know that this train is moving fast, right? So we've got the Snohomish County Food and Farming Center, which will be at McCollum Park. That's in the budget. That was asked for, that park project, or that farming project. It's about a $6 million project. That's a really big number. So what they did was say, look, we're going to go in phases. So when I put in a capital budget request for that farming center right here in McCollum Park, I put it in right around 2 million, right? So that, because it's phased, because to your point, right, not everything is going to be shovel ready. Not everything is going to be able to be completed within this biennium cycle. So there's absolutely ways to do it. But when you just kind of conceptually think about this food and farming center, and if you haven't seen that project, it's amazing. It's going to be 7,000 square foot processing center, 500 square foot commercial kitchen, and a year-round covered Pike Place Market style farmers market, right? That's going to be countywide for our farmers to go to and sell their wares and process their wares. Now, if you go, you snake up that street a little bit, it sounds like the city of Mill Creek has some property there that you might be looking at some different things that could be a community center or some other amazing place for folks to congregate, which, by the way, happens to be not more than a mile, maybe a half mile from a high school and middle school that serves thousands of young people. And so now all of a sudden we're connecting things, right? In the sub area plan, that's going to have another Swift bus. It's going to take you to light rail. I mean, I just feel like we're at this precipice of this amazing growth and opportunity. Things are being put in budgets, plans are being made. And so I want Mill Creek right there with it all.
Thank you, Rep. Berg. Mayor Holtzclaw, you have a question?
More of a comment. Most of our discussion here has been focused on the capital facilities projects that we want to undertake or have been planning to undertake. There's another category of those projects, and there's ones that we're forced by the state to undertake. And the caution is just be careful and be mindful of the unfunded mandates that are tucked away in some of these bills, particularly some of the GMA bills. There's one that's working its way through the legislature, which has already passed the House, and I anticipate will pass the Senate, that will put an obligation on cities to fund fixing culverts a few years down the road. I know the state is struggling with the culvert case from the federal courts at the state level, but that's a provision tucked in a bill that could have potentially significant financial consequences on us and our ability to deal with some of the capital projects that we want to undertake 5 or 6 years down the road, that we may have to use some of that funding to deal with the mandate we get from the state. So just remember to keep the eye on those. It's usually tucked away in the small print at the end of a long bill.
You make a good point, Mayor. Just know, so you'll know this, we're going to spend about $700 million in our transportation budget on culverts this year, and we're going to have to spend more. So I just want you to know that your point is well taken. We've heard that before.
Yeah.
Like
Culverts isn't tucked away. It's a big price tag for a lot of cities. We hear a lot from the Association of Washington Cities, as well as all of your neighboring cities. And it's helpful though. And I love that's top of mind, because it should be top of mind for us. We don't want unfunded mandates. Being a school board director, kind of with my other hat, I am loath unfunded mandates, and I adore local control. And so I think if we could make this kind of a common thing of us coming in and talking with you, but also getting your legislative priorities when that cycle begins. So we start, we're off to the races starting in January, 105-day session every other year, 60-day session in those off years. And so it'd be great to have, a piece of paper in our hand saying, look, the city of Mill Creek cares about this, this, and this. And if anything so much as hiccups on any of these things, either pro or con, we're calling you, right? We're like, Mayor Holtzclaw, this is what's going on. Can you come testify? Mayor Holtzclaw, can you get us a letter so that we can tell the story of how this is going to negatively or positively impact Mill Creek? That's what we hang our hat on, so that we can represent you more effectively. But in lieu of that, call, text you, but everybody I think on this call and leadership has our cell phone numbers. And if you say, Rep. Berg, hey, this is coming down, this bill is going to be at your doorstep, make sure you pay attention. That helps. It helps focus us. So I'm sure it's the same for my seatmate.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, I'll just underscore what she said. We can't stop all of the legislation, but hearing from you, we can slow it down. That's one of the reasons I'm going around meeting with all of the police chiefs. We probably should have met with them when I was running a policing policy leadership team, and now I'm meeting with them, finding out. So a lot of the legislation we're working on, we can't stop them, but we can amend them, and we can do things to slow the process down, to have more conversations.
And that's one thing we've started discussing as a council that we'll be fleshing out more over the course of the year, is how we can be more proactive at the legislature, and especially coming up with an agenda prior to the session so we can inform you of what our priorities are. We've typically relied on AWC, and I think we've matured to the point as a city where we need to have our own representation. So we're going to be evaluating that over the next 6 to 8 months so we can be better prepared going into the next session.
Look forward to it. And we're always here. I know where you guys live, and you guys know where we live. And you have our phone numbers. I know you guys are very, very busy. So
Rep. Levick, if you have just a few more seconds,
Absolutely.
looks like Councilmember Morgan had a question and then followed by Councilmember Cavallari real quick.
Yes, thank you for joining us, representatives. I really appreciate all the work that you do. With our community slowly reopening as we roll out these different phases, and 2020 being as disastrous as it was to local businesses, are there anything in the works to help stimulate new businesses or existing ones as we finally roll out to full production?
You know, I'm not a person with a business background, so I'm not going to try to tell you that I know the complete answer to this. But what I would say is I think we need to open safely. And as we open, we need to make sure that these businesses are able to stay open. And then all of us, we need to encourage people to, particularly in our city. I mean, I was down just yesterday. I won't tell you what I was doing, but I was down spending money. And I told the members of my group that I had to leave. I had a virtual massage at the Mill Creek Wellness. But I'm just saying, we need to just encourage people to spend money in our city. I refer to that as, we used to call that when I was growing up, the double duty dollar. You make money in the city, you spend it in the city. And those are the things that I would encourage people to do, and to make sure that we practice those safe habits so that we won't have to shut down again. But I think as we reopen this economy, we need to keep it open. And so far, I'm feeling good about it. I like what I saw with our revenue forecast, and I hope you guys will see some of the same results as businesses open and continue to open in the city.
And I would echo that as well. One of the first bills we passed this session was to make sure that PPE loans were not taxed, subject to B&O taxes, right? So that's one of those things where we gave relief to our small businesses. And that was actually a request from a CPA who said, look, this is gonna come due and you gotta fix it. So immediately we got into action. It was one of our early action bills. But that said, to Rep. Levick's point, it's consumer confidence, right? So at this point, we need consumers to feel confident, to feel safe going out and spending their dollars. And I'll just give you an anecdote. My daughter, who's 16, she was at Central Market the first time the kind of anti-maskers tried to kind of take over. And to say she was terrified would be an understatement. Things like that don't instill confidence, right? The shoppers in that store that day, or the employees, they didn't go home thinking, wow, this is the place to be. They went home going, I didn't feel safe. I didn't know what to do. And her feedback wasn't even so much about the anti-maskers. She was scared because the adults were scared. Right. And so when you're scared, you don't spend money. I mean, I bet you everybody, most of the folks in there that day with a full basket might not have checked out with that same full basket. That was an immediate impact economically because of poor public health choices by those individuals. Right. So as a state, it's up to us to really say, make good choices, do what's safe, spend money because you feel good. But thank you for that question, Councilmember.
Yep, good, great question, sir.
Councilmember Cavallari, you were next.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'll just be really quick because the mayor Mayor Holtzclaw kind of stole my thunder a little bit. We have representatives, we have kicked around the notion of, I guess, for lack of a better term, putting a lobbyist or an advocate on the payroll for Olympia. What's your thoughts on that? Is that really the best vessel? Is that a wise spending of public dollars, or do you think the phone call, the emailing is probably a better avenue?
I'm going to just take the liberty to say that is a decision. I don't want to say you should or you shouldn't. I think that's a decision that you have to feel comfortable making. Every single lobbyist that I've worked with, and I know them, I was on the phone with probably 7 or 8, on the Zoom with 7 or 8 today. They're there to work for you. So I would just simply say that it's something. You guys have some very, very smart people in your city, very, very smart people on your city council, smart leadership. That's a decision that I think that you should make, but maybe you should ask those questions of say, AWC or other lobbyists who are representing cities. I've not seen any pushback at all. I've not seen any downside of having a good contract lobbyist on board.
Yeah, and it's a local control issue. And I think that's part of why you as a local jurisdiction, you can make those decisions. But what I will say is that, you're fortunate to have representatives that live literally in your city. So that's always a good thing. But yeah, just you need to make the right decision for the city strategically.
Councilmember I think Councilmember Briles has his hand raised, and if we could end there, I know Rep. Lovick and Rep. Berg probably have other places to be, and we want to be making sure we are being good stewards with their time. So Councilmember Briles.
Thank you for coming tonight and sharing so much of your time with us. My question is about the suspected coming children's vaccinations. Is there any planning for distribution of that separate from how the vaccines have been rolled out for adults at the legislative level, or is that going to be left to the local health districts?
You know, I believe, and I'm not sure if April has heard something that Rep. Berg has heard something that I haven't heard. I believe the health district in coordination, in consultation with the governor, I think they're working on those details now. But I will say this, I've had both of my shots, and from what I'm hearing, the process is going a lot better than people anticipated that it would. And I don't know what the process is, but I'm going to find out the answer for it, and I will send you the answer to that and send it to the rest of the members also.
Yeah, and I would just echo that. We haven't heard anything specific on children's vaccinations, mostly because they're still doing the testing and for the efficacy of those vaccinations. Once those come out, when I think about how we coordinate and kind of what our kids do where they are, right? You think about our schools, and that was one thought early in the vaccination process, was having vaccine sites at schools, and this was for adults. And so I think once we do have a vaccine that's available to young folks, then I think the question will become, how do we work with all of our partners in cities and schools and other localities to get folks the vaccines that they want.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again for your time, Representatives Lovick and Berg. We really appreciate it, especially taking a little extra time tonight. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for getting this set up and leading the discussion tonight. And we look forward to talking with you again. Good luck.
Can I just close by saying this? I hope you guys know we have a wonderful city. I love living here. This is my 29th year living in Mill Creek. And Representative Briles wanted to know what if I had something to do. Yes, I'm going to go for a nice long walk in this beautiful city. I love walking. I love stopping and talking to people. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace, patience, and kindness to all of you.
Good to see you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good questions. What's up? We are on to new business, a matter of a contract extension. City Manager and Director Todd.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Director Todd is going to present to you information relating to our request for an extension on our expiration date professional services contract. Mike, can you take it away, please? Director Todd.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Too many screens open. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City Manager, for kicking that off. This is a fairly short topic. Basically, what we need to do is extend this contract. I think we've got some council members and some community members at the meeting tonight that may not understand all the acronyms, et cetera. We are not making a big decision about what to do with this project. We're simply asking for an extension of the contract, but I will give you a little bit of background. So with that, let me share a screen to give you an overhead view of what we're talking about. So can you see that map on your screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So this is the entire eGov area, East Gateway Urban Village, as I'm outlining here. And for a little bit of orientation, this is the Mill Creek Apartments. This is the townhomes. This is Buffalo Park that were all built fairly recently on one end of the property. This is the the first building out there, the 132nd Street Land Development, the lawyer's offices and physical therapist office. This is the vintage. So those are the things that are built now. And the thing that came from a long time ago is Advent Lutheran Church is here at this location here. This is it's a little bit older photo, but this is the construction going on at the farm. And this is Penny Creek Elementary School across the street. So the project was kicked off in July of 2019. And at that time, it was in our capital improvement plan. It was looking at what would be the routing for a road to complete the spine road between 44th, which has been built down to here, and 39th, which is being built by the farm that comes down here and comes across as what we're calling 133rd. The spine road would be about 133rd. The project at that time was to have Grant Osborne look at what it would take, what the right-of-way requirements would be in terms of the amount of dirt you'd buy and the conveyance of the stormwater that would come from this impervious surface, shown here basically in red. The right-of-way right here in general is already owned by the city. It was part of the development agreement with 132nd Street Partners. But the Rim Kim property, as we call it here, and Advent Lutheran Church, that dirt has yet to be acquired. So back in July 2019, the project was kicked off, and the expectation was it would be done by July of 2020. The project kind of got paused about when COVID happened, February, May of 2020, and just went on pause, and not much more work was done. Last fall, we brought that back up again. A lot of construction had happened down here at the farm in the interim. And we discovered that the original plan was to take the stormwater from this area, flow it downhill through this street, and then through this was a utility easement that they thought was available to bring stormwater here, come and go through a pipe and go out to the wetlands here where all the stormwater naturally used to flow and where this farm development is taking that. Lots of things got built in this area in the meantime, and so it is not really feasible to take it through there anymore because there's a lot of utilities. So we investigated and said we probably have to directionally bore underneath this. That's not cheap, but it's not horrible. But we also said, let's look back at these old numbers from back in 2010, 2012, when the eGov plan was first put together. What would it cost to do this? That direction to Grant Osborne was given to them in the middle of December. And lo and behold, that contract that was supposed to be finished in July of 2020 was not. It ran out at the end of last year. So what we're simply doing now is saying no change in the price, no change in the overall objective of what we're trying to do, but we need some time extension on that so that we can continue to pay our contractor to do some investigatory work on this. We will be coming back to council in the future and talking more about this. Is this something we want to do? How would we pay for it? But right now, we're just asking for the ability to pay Grant Osborne for the work they've been doing for us, which is on the order of $10,000 worth. With that, I'm going to stop sharing that screen to see if there's questions.
Any questions?
I guess real quick,
Go ahead, Councilmember Cavallari, then Councilmember Morgan.
Director Todd, I know we've probably been over this more times than anybody would like. What is still the holdup with the Rim Kim property? Are they just unwilling sellers at this point, or is it a money deal? This has kind of come up several times. I think the last time Public Works Director Gina Portalosa, she told us that it was imminent, that the acquisition of the land. So I guess I'm just maybe check out where we are.
Yeah, I can't speak to their particular desires, and we need to be careful about how we talk about acquiring land in that area, but I don't think there's any objection to it, but we have yet to complete the engineering studies that would say exactly what part of the dirt do we want to buy. And that was what this project was about. What we had in our capital plan was $500,000 in the last biennium, previous biennium, for doing this analysis under this contract. After we completed that analysis, it would have been go off to get appraisals for that property and then acquire that right of way. We never got past the part of the analysis on what we needed to do. So we're only at step 1 of 3 on the project that was in the last biennium. We rolled that project forward to this biennium, discovered in December that contract expired for us to complete that development work. If that helps.
It does. Thanks for the clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. In looking at the map, this spine road seems like, with all the stormwater problems and needing to purchase, that it would be fairly costly to put in a very small stretch of spine road. What are the benefits of doing this? It appears to only connect one community to the farm and Vintage. And does it do something else?
Yeah, well, that's a bigger discussion. I popped the map back up there. So the original idea of eGov was to take people who are going by here at 45 miles an hour and bring them off and slow down and go through various retail and other kinds of businesses. So instead of having a lot of driveways in individual properties, which would have been the traditional style of development, it would have been bring them in on this spine road, much like we do we bring people in off of 527 and bring them into town center and bring them through Main Street. So that was the original concept. It has been, the concept has been continuing with the idea that this connection would help in terms of the amount of traffic that's coming in and off of all those properties, and provide an internal spine that would connect people both for, these are the rooftops that would like to go to the restaurant that's going to be down here, for instance. So wouldn't it be nice if people could drive, walk, maybe bike, and enjoy a promenade along through here? So that was the idea, was get people off of the highway into a slower mixed use development project. It is it's not inexpensive. The benefit is that this part of the road was built by the vintage developer. This part of the road, a big hunk of it here, is being built by the farm. But the church is never well, I shouldn't say never. Unlikely, if they stay as a church, there's not much incentive for them to build that road, for instance. These parcels here might become more valuable if the road was built, but the owner of that may or may not care to do that. In this property we're just talking about, this is for a long time, this has been a small, long-term homestead and a small business. And for a long time, they not expressed much interest. I think they might be open to it now, but that's again for a future discussion.
And Councilmember Morgan, the road wasn't originally a road to nowhere. The second phase of the Spine Road would have connected to Seattle Hill Road and had a roundabout there. And after much discussion over several years, we decided to take that off the table and take that out of the CFP. So it originally was not a road to nowhere.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, the one down here, yeah.
Any further questions? If not, this is the point of the proceedings where we entertain a motion. Should there be one?
There's a resolution, Mayor, there's a resolution in the packet.
We have it up on the screen as well, Mr. Daginger.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and move to adopt the resolution as stated, contract number 2019-1527 with Gray Osborne, extending the expiration date to 12/31/22.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Did anyone abstain? The motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Michael and Mike. Next up, a brief update on the DRCC from Michael and Karen Reed. Welcome, Karen.
And thank you, Mayor. In a moment, Karen is going to provide council with a high-level calendar for the project. We heard that as a request in our last meeting, and we wanted to honor that to present you with a bigger picture. On those areas that we can be specific, we are, and for those that are concept, Karen will speak to that momentarily. I do have a couple of updates. As I mentioned last week, the community survey has been launched, and it will be open through March 31st. As of today, we have had 906 responses, which our pollster Vanessa Lund indicates is actually a very good turnout. I'm optimistic that we will continue to hear from more folks before we are done. Kristen Rasmussen has been doing an excellent job in promoting our survey. She has reached out to social media, including Nextdoor, Facebook, the city's page and Mill Creek community page, Instagram and Twitter. We've sent press releases to the usual local media. She has emailed Mill Creek Sports Park user groups, Mill Creek Little League, Silver Lake Soccer, the Washington Rush, Jackson High School Athletics. We were notified our Everett School District contacts. We've reached out to the Mill Creek Town Center Business Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club. We've contacted the Mill Creek Community Association to share with local HOAs and community members. We've also contacted Mill Creek Living Magazine's Facebook page. We've also contacted the city's community engagement group list, which includes the nonprofits, the libraries, the churches, the fire department, and again, as I mentioned earlier, our schools. We've posted on various website groups, including the city's digital newsletter and our economic development outreach. We've also posted on ActiveNet email And thus far, that would be a total of 2,598 people that we've hit for emails. We've also notified our boards and commissions, including the youth board. We want to ensure that our young people also provide us with feedback. Also the art board, park and rec board, planning commission, design review board. And finally, we sent out an internal email to all of our city staff. You know, Kristen has really spread this as wide as we can to all of our groups. If there's any others that the council thinks that we have omitted, we are open to those suggestions and inputs, and we'll reach out as well. She's also committing to additional outreach this week and reminding all of those individuals and entities that I just mentioned. So thanks again, Kristen, for your hustle here and getting that out.
Michael, is the online polling, is it exclusive to Mill Creek citizens?
No, it is not. It's not intended to be. It was broadcast on a region, and Karen can speak more to that in a little bit, Councilman Cavallari.
Thank you.
Yes, through the city's Facebook page with the survey, we have at least received, in terms of views, over 3,873 views and 21 shares around the subject. And as mentioned last week, the plan is to bring the survey results to council at a study session on April 13th. So with all of this, really just numerically, it reflects tremendous participation. What I have been asked to remind our council and our community of is that the survey is not intended to present a statistically valid result in the same way that a poll would be conducted. But we do believe that it's cost effective and this provides us with useful information about the community's interest. The pollster will do a check to see if we're receiving multiple responses from any single IP address, but generally the more people we hear from, the better. I understand that some are actively encouraging folks to complete the poll, which we appreciate. And I certainly hope that we hear from the broadest range in our community, in the broadest number of residents and business owners to help us inform us of their interests. Finally, as I mentioned last week, the survey is one of several phase one inputs that we are working on. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, with your permission, to Karen Reed to continue on with the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, council members, Mayor Holtzclaw, Mayor Pro Tem Bignell. It's nice to see you all again. Where I wanted to give a quick update tonight on what we think the schedule might look for rolling forward. When we first talked about this project back in February 9th, we outlined 4 substantive items we wanted to pursue in this initial phase. The first was doing guiding principles. The second was getting some brainstorming and council input, a little bit further community input around ideas. The third was a needs assessment and some site capacity analysis. And then we would try to move into refining options. So if Naomi would be kind enough to share her screen, we can see this is just a recap, and I won't read it, but this is the list of all the folks that Kristen Rasmussen has reached out to in connection with the community survey, and we're optimistic that we'll continue to see more folks and looking forward to see what the results of that are. We'll have this online if you want to peruse it in further detail. So the next slide here, this is what the work group, internal staff group that is working on this, which includes the city manager, Mike Todd, Laurel Gimzo, Kristen Rasmussen, and Tom Rogers, and myself. And this is sort of where we are thinking the exploratory phase of data collection that we think we're in now, how this would roll out. As you can see, February, we did the guiding principles with you. March, we are in the process of doing the community survey. Council property tours, we'd like to really encourage those of you who haven't recently taken a tour of the property to get in touch with Mike Todd or Tom Rogers, and they will happily take you out and walk you around. It takes about an hour to do that, maybe an hour and a half, but it's really enlightening to see the site. So really encourage, I think there's a couple of you that haven't gone yet, and hope that we can wrap that up this month as well. As Michael said, we are planning to come back on April 13th with the results of the community survey. The pollster will give you a presentation to share with you what she sees from these results and what the data says. And then we would like to talk to you that same evening to try to get your feedback on 2 substantive pieces of work that we would like to dive into after we get the survey and hear your feedback on the survey. The first of those is what we call the facility study. We would like to go out and do some high-level data collection on around 10 or 12 or so facilities that are within the range of facilities that you and the community have expressed interest in pursuing. And we would reach out to people that are owning or operating those facilities in our region probably, and ask them, how did the funding come together? What was the city's role? Who owns it now? Who's operating it? What does the operating budget look like? What kind of partnership arrangements are in place? How long did it take you to get, from conception to reality? And what are the lessons learned for you? So it's a sort of a high level, we present this in a summary format, so it's not hundreds of pages, just sort of a high level piece of data on 12 facilities. We'd like to bring forward a list of facilities and get your sign off on, yep, we would like to hear more about those. And then the idea of the needs assessment. The last time the city did a needs assessment was around parks and recreation issues, and I think it was back in 2009. And it was a combination of a consultant and some in-house work. So the staff team is putting together a way of potentially doing this work in-house rather than going out for an additional consultant contract. That creates obvious scoping challenges to make sure that we could get something done given everybody else's workload. But we're going to come back to you in April and say, this is what we think we would like to do with that, the kind of groups we'd like to reach out to in our area, the types of questions we'd like to ask them. This is designed to give you a sense of, again, within the broad range of facilities that are on deck at that point, what are those types of user groups need in terms of facilities or space? What do they look for ideally? What do they want to avoid? What thoughts do they have about that? And that would also help inform the council. We'd like to be able to present the facility study back to you in May. It will probably take us several months to complete the needs assessment because it will be over the summer. So that would come back probably at this point, we're thinking September. But in June, we'd like to bring forth a panel of folks who have made their careers working in parks and recreation community facilities and anything else that remains high on your list for further exploration, and give you an opportunity to hear from them and talk to them about their advice and lessons learned in the range of types of projects that you are looking at. And through this period, we'll try to continue some lower level of public input. That lower level by meaning, I don't think we'll do another survey right off the bat. The pollster's clear that you don't want to over exhaust people with surveys. So we want to be really strategic about when we go back and ask them for more information. But we want to continue to create opportunities to get input and keep people up to date on what we're up to. We're hoping to come back in September, as I said, with the needs assessment. If we're able to do it in-house, we would probably then posit an additional phase of outreach. We would have some site capacity analysis for you. And then in October, we would probably be looking at a sort of a discussion to start refining the universe of projects that we want to continue to explore and start thinking about budget implications for next year. So this is sort of the exploratory phase, timeline and tasks that we are working on right now. And I'll stop to see if there are any questions or comments about this at this point, or suggestions.
I have a couple of comments.
John?
Well, one thing, I was going through your 4-step process guiding principles, and we're going to go into brainstorming, then the needs assessment and the analysis. I don't see where the brainstorming session is on here, where we can, we haven't done that process where we actually talk about various alternatives and also define them. My concern on the survey is when we ask people if they like sports parks or arts and entertainment or various things, they're going to say, a lot of people are just going to say yes because they do. But I think if we could give them a specific example of what we're thinking about, they can provide a better answer, an answer of, oh, okay, they're thinking about doing this for this reason. Then I can provide a better, more well-founded answer as a citizen. So that was one thing I would like to add into this, is that we could do that brainstorming section.
That's a good point, and I should have had that word on there, but it just felt a little awkward. But the plan is to include that in the April discussion session, to have sort of a set of questions to get your reactions and see, based on what you've been hearing from the community and where we started, are there adjustments or refinements that you want to make at this point? And I think also I would say that the facilities study will be framed based on that discussion in April, that brainstorming discussion in April, and that should also help us get more to the point that you're reaching, council member, where you're saying, can you identify a handful of facilities or maybe kind of like something we might be interested in? And we'll be looking at specific facilities, bringing back information. And I think the suggestion is good. Perhaps we can try to frame some more outreach around that's simple for folks to weigh in, but definitely make sure that folks are brought along as we go.
So before we do any facility study scoping or needs assessment, we will go through a brainstorming and we will scope these out. My other one, I do have to offer some input on the survey. I'm glad that we're going out and getting input. I have to be honest with you though, I'm very concerned about the survey. It's great to get 9,000 people responding, but a Survey Monkey is the least expensive and most effective tool for surveying when you have a captive email list that you can go to. Unfortunately, what we're doing is putting the survey online and putting it out there and then trying to promote people. And I agree that Kristen Rasmussen is doing a stellar job of trying to reach as many people as she can but then those people need to reach out to their groups. And like in the service organizations, I actually had to get the email addresses for each of those service organizations, Kiwanis, Rotary, and the Chamber, and email those out in order to make sure that information got emailed out, because it just stops with the contact that she gets. It's a rather laborious process. I'm also very concerned that on our survey that we're not taking into account the seniors, which are a large percentage of our population. And in a survey of this kind, many of them are uncomfortable with filling out an online survey. And in many cases, I don't know how we're reaching them. I did reach out to Brooke Knight at the North Shore Senior Center, and she promised me that she would email the survey to all of the senior center email list that she had, but that's still a very small percentage of our senior population. So when we get the survey back, and city manager said it, I want to be very, very careful before anybody sees the results of that survey. That survey, for us to make decisions based on the results of that survey, chances are it is not, well, we can look at that, but to say that it's going to be reflective of the citizens of Mill Creek and surrounding area, when we look at the age skews and how they pertain to, what percentage of our population is over the age of 65, and what percentage of the survey is over the age of 65, and what percentage is under the age of 18, or, all of that. It's very difficult when you're doing a survey like this. When the scary thing is, I've done surveys for over 40 years. Many people will take that data and say, this is the truth, this is gospel when it comes in. And you've got to be very careful of that, because that survey may reflect 2,000 people out of the 20,000 in our city, and it may reflect 60% of 8% of our population. So you got to be very careful about who's actually filling it out and the information that we look at. So I'm a little concerned about it. I think it's great to get input. I'm all for it. I would like to continue to get input, but I would strongly suggest that when we have this section here to continue public input, if we really want to get a representative input from the community, we should definitely send a postcard to every mailing address in this city. It's not that expensive, and it's well worth the money when we're talking about millions of dollars being invested in to get a clear sample. A postcard to every citizen telling them where the survey is online, and if they want a paper copy, a phone number at the city they can call to get one mailed to them, so that we get an accurate, I would love an accurate representation of the city of Mill Creek, of what they want. And so I've been a little concerned since I saw the survey come out, and I looked at the questioning on it, and I looked at the way it's being distributed. And then I went out and contacted some groups on my own to see if they were getting the survey, and they're not. And it's not due to the lack of effort from Christine Rasmussen. She has been working her tail off trying to get this thing distributed, trying to get people to look at it, but it's a laborious process. And at best, it will be skewed as to who we're getting input from.
I think that the difference between a statistically valid poll and a community survey is something that we've been trying to re-emphasize in the city manager speaking points to you. It is a matter of time and budget that we chose this path, but your points are well taken. There's a distinction between a statistically valid community poll and this community surveying effort that we are doing now. That said, the pollster is in fact quite encouraged at the level of response that we're getting, and we're going to continue to work hard to get additional responses, as many as we can, between now and the 31st when the poll will close.
Any other comments or questions? I don't see any yellow hands. Am I correct? I don't see the whole screen, but okay.
Okay, so if you want to roll to the last slide here, Naomi, please. This just sort of gives you a general sense of how we see the phases moving forward. We're doing data gathering now, and then we are hoping to go into being able to refining what are the types of projects in a much narrower way that you would like to explore. You've made a point that as a council that engaging with partners is potentially a very interesting thing here for you. And then we would begin to do that. Obviously, the more specific we are and the type of project you want to pursue, perhaps the more productive those efforts will be, and how long they will take us is dependent in part on the number of projects types that you still would like to explore, and the number of partners that would potentially be involved and their capacity to engage with us, just because we don't want to, if a partner is going to be involved with the project, you want to make sure they're in there from the get-go in terms of design and such. And so that phase could take us longer, but this is sort of a best case at this point. Then we would really hone in on exactly what it is you want to do and move into the, okay, pick a funding model, pick an architect or an approach to developing the project design, pick an approach to building the project. And if there needs to be a fundraising, grant raising component, we would know enough at that point, hopefully, to really dive in on there. And again, that phase is really indeterminate in length, depending on how complex the project is that we're going for. And then phase 4 would be putting all that and digging spades in the ground, hopefully, and starting to see something come out of the ground. Oops, we just lost our slide. But that was the sort of the phasing that we sort of see for this effort. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. This is very general, obviously, at this point.
Yeah, it is general. And my suggestion would be we take dates off that, because they could be shorter, they could be longer.
Could be much longer.
Yeah. So I don't want to put dates and create an expectation that that's when things will happen.
We definitely did that for phases 3 and 4, but we were sort of hoping to try to pull through phase 1. But you're right, phase 2 could take much longer.
Well, part of the reason,
We'll do that
if we're not identifying a project until spring of 22, that potentially puts us into 2023 for talking to the legislature for money, which is a long ways down the road. So I don't want to rule out that there might be consensus sooner rather than later on something to move forward with, that we may be in a position, may not, but we may be in a position to move forward sooner. So
okay.
I think the phases are fine. I just would encourage us not to put dates on there quite yet.
We'll take them all off, all the dates, they're gone. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions, comments?
Sorry, yeah.
Seeing none, thank you for the update, Karen and Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.
We have, before we get to the consent agenda, a proposed new initiative that I'll turn the floor over to Councilmember Cavallari for in a moment. And just a reminder, when we bring these forward, they're generally to start the discussion to see if there's a consensus for moving forward with something one way or the other. So with that pretext, Councilmember Cavallari, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, that's kind of, I guess, what we're looking for, like we normally do, is the kind of bobbleheads or thumbs up for some action. Anyhow, the Mayor Pro Tem brought up State v. Blake early when she introduced the representatives to our meeting. Some of you may not be aware of the Supreme Court ruling, which essentially decriminalized the possession of narcotics. Things like heroin, meth, cocaine, ecstasy, pills. You can now possess them without consequences to some degree or another. State v. Blake is what the ruling is called, and I want to read the opening to the decision. But before that, let me just give you some background and the rationale for the Supreme Court's decision. During a legal detention and lawful search of an individual for probable cause reasons, during that subsequent search, Blake, who is the individual in question, was found to have drugs in her front pockets. She was eventually charged with possessing a controlled substance, and that is the case that is before the court, or has come before the court and been ruled on the court. Her argument was that the pants were not hers. They were someone else's pants she was walking around with that day, and voila, there were drugs in them. So surprise, surprise. Anyway, the Supreme Court actually bought into that in a 5-4 decision. And I'm going to read their opening paragraph, and I'll be as succinct as possible. Bear with me. Washington's strict liability drug possession statute gives the RCW, makes possession of a controlled substance a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison plus a hefty fine, leads to deprivation of numerous other rights and opportunities, and does all this without proof that the defendant even knew they possessed the substance. This case presents an issue of first impression for the court. Does this restrict liability drug possession statute with these substantial penalties for such innocent passive conduct, and does it exceed the legislature's police power? I read that because it gives some context to the rationale behind the Supreme Court's decision. It's probably one of the more shocking decisions I've read, and I've read a lot. So I wouldn't deny, I don't think anybody would deny that we are in the middle of a drug epidemic. I would characterize it as a drug pandemic in our community. Overdoses and suicides have reached numbers that we've never seen before. The scourge of addiction is not getting better, it's getting worse. The potency of the narcotics, it's more lethal than it's ever been before, and COVID only amplifies it. But there's a lot more. The court's ruling serves to not only undermine the legislative branch and its ability under the Constitution to make laws, it also halts our intervention process for the addicted in our community. Over 90% of people, especially our youth, that get into treatment programs or get the help they need is through law enforcement intervention or court programs. These are the vital conduits to getting the help they need. We're essentially the tip of the spear for crisis and drug management. This court ruling serves to undermine the community's role and the rights to police itself. It also blocks the most viable pathway to eliminating drug abuse from our citizens' lives. The next piece is something that's already happening, and it's called overcharging. Drug possession is one of the lowest tiered felonies anyone could possibly receive in the spectrum of felonies. A Class C felony is the bottom tier of the punitive standard. Law enforcement and prosecutors have already begun the process of overcharging. This will be very problematic, and it's already starting. Simple possession will now be charged with crimes like possession with intent to distribute, possession with intent to deliver. All they need is intent. Conspiracy to possess, conspiracy to deliver, and manufacturing or delivering of a controlled substance, and several others. These crimes are similar, but carry much stiffer penalties and fines, thus invalidating the court's reason for its decision. Making it a gross misdemeanor gives the city the autonomy to decide what's acceptable community conduct and community standards, but also minimizes punitive impacts. Lastly, those that are in the throes of addiction will simply learn to carry a lesser amount or possess less simply to avoid prosecution. If we don't address this with an ordinance, drug availability will be more prevalent and more accessible simply because it's legal to walk around with now. I'm sorry, that is just simply irresponsible and reckless. Doing nothing is not acceptable at this point. Our responsibility as lawmakers is to protect and serve the people we govern, and that's everybody. I'm going to close, but I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to challenge the council a little bit. Do we want to handcuff our police officers from conducting community police work? The amount of peripheral crime that comes from drug abuse or drug use accounts for about 75% of all police calls and interactions. This will undoubtedly get worse. Do we want, as a society, where people can walk around with heroin and methamphetamine in their pockets, perhaps having their children be able to access it, perhaps having their siblings be able to access it? Do we turn a blind eye to self-destruction? Because I assure you, that's exactly what this sentences those people to. I'm going to ask you to join me in adopting the ordinance, and Naomi can probably give us a copy. Grant's here for questions, and so am I. I'm going to ask you to give bobbleheads to move this forward and bring it to us next week to make simple drug possession a lesser crime, a gross misdemeanor in the city of Mill Creek, with a maximum sentence of 364 days in jail, and that's a maximum from 0 to 364. And the fine can be disputed. I'd also like to give kudos to the city of Marysville and their council for being the first council, along with Mayor Nearing, to jump off and put this into legislation 2 weeks ago. Thanks for listening. If you have questions, I would be more than happy to answer. What we have here, folks, is a dangerous, slippery slope, and I don't think it's been thought through. It's an activism from the bench. We are the ones that make the laws. We are the legislators, and we have the right to fix what's broken at this point. Thank you.
Before I open up for discussion, I see on the screen our prosecutor, Chad Krebs, is with us. I'm going to ask him a question to provide a little more context. Councilmember Cavallari spoke to the factual background. I've not read the decision. I've just read about it and heard about it. I assume that the court was purporting to interpret a statute that was adopted by the legislature. If I'm correct about that, could you provide, not saying the court was right, but I'm trying to understand, and I think it'd be helpful, understand what the statute was that they were trying to interpret and why they ended up at the decision they ended up with.
Sure. The rationale, I mean, it's a pretty lengthy opinion. Basically, the issue was simple possession, blind simple possession of a controlled substance. The bill itself, the law has been in effect since 1981. As Councilmember Cavallari indicated, the not in my pants type defense is not at all uncommon, and it's been tried hundreds of times and it's been unsuccessful. This was one of the times where it was successful. But it's simple possession of a controlled substance. And the issue that the Supreme Court took was that it criminalized what they deemed innocent conduct in the sense where this young woman had a controlled substance in her pocket. Her position was she just bought the pants from a secondhand store. She testified that she does not use the substance, and she had, I guess, character witnesses indicating that she also didn't use the controlled substance. The Supreme Court's opinion went through some quasi-tortured analysis of the issue, but they looked at issues like, would someone delivering an Amazon package that had a controlled substance in it be subject to the RCW, and it was an RCW, to answer your question, it's state law. Would they be subject to this particular crime? And the short answer would be, technically as written, yes. An innocent possession is just as criminal as a intentional possession. So their decision was that as a strict liability, meaning no mens rea, no intent to commit a crime, it was unconstitutional, that it violated the state's police powers by not having an intent element, and violated both the state and the federal due process clause. So what Marysville did pretty simply was simply add knowing to, basically, they almost took verbatim RCW 6954.013 and just added a knowing element so that they can't knowingly possess controlled substance. And they also added or knowingly use or possess with intent to use a controlled substance. So they added that mens rea requirement, that intent element to the crime, which would, I think, bring it in line with kind of the Supreme Court's concerns over how they read 4013 as it's currently written.
So the statute as it's currently written, the statute which applies statewide, does not have that knowingly language in it to show the intent.
Right. It just says you can't possess a controlled substance. So if you possess it, technically you're criminally liable for it simply by possessing it. They only addressed subsection 1 of that ordinance, of that RCW. There are other sections of 4013 that they didn't specifically say were unconstitutional. They were really only focusing on part 1. I know the Marysville ordinance does talk to multiple sections of that ordinance.
Then let me ask one more question. So I'm a little confused now because I understood the Supreme Court's decision decriminalized possession, but it sounds like what Marysville did is basically implement what the Supreme Court did.
Yeah, I think that the Supreme Court kind of went through and talked about, well, if this statute had an intent element, we wouldn't be having this argument. So Marysville said, okay, well, great. If you think that this intent element solves the problem, then here you go. Here's an intent element. So it's technically, I always tell people that drugs aren't legal in the state right now. They're just not currently criminalized, at least under the state RCW. So this would be a way where, at least on a local level, at least, possession of a controlled substance could be something that law enforcement could investigate and could be prosecuted.
So in my final point of clarification, so if the statute had been written that way, then Blake in that case would have been able to argue, I didn't know.
Yeah, so one of the things that they talked about in the trial was what's called unwitting possession, but just you didn't know that you possessed it, therefore I shouldn't be guilty of it. And the Supreme Court said, well, that's great, but unwitting possession doesn't matter because knowledge isn't an element. So you can't argue I didn't know because you knowing doesn't matter. So now that we add the knowledge element, or if we were to, then a defendant could say, I didn't knowingly possess. And I think that would be, in line with Blake, which would then make that a defense and add the mens rea requirement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And that would, if I could, Chad, would that also mean that the prosecutor would have to have the burden of proof of knowledge, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we would have to prove that they, well, obviously the jurisdiction, that they knew they possessed a controlled substance and that it was indeed a controlled substance, which sometimes is equally as a problem because you have to get stuff sent off to the state lab and typically.
Okay, thank you. I saw Mayor Pro Tem's hand go up, but it's not up, so I'll give her the first bite if she has a comment, and I'm sure Councilmember Bond is itching to ask a question or make a comment.
That mute button. Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions. I think this is extremely important, and I want to make sure that we are looking at this and we are covering all of our bases. So I want to thank Councilmember Cavallari for bringing this up for our discussion. And a couple questions that I had, I thought as we, so I guess I am bobbleheading in for a discussion to move this further for discussion. But I have a couple questions. I was hoping we could have some more information on as we move forward this. I'm concerned what happens if we do this and then the state comes out with their solution and we're not in agreement. That was a concern I had. Also, I have some questions on that I want us to discuss too. I'd like to know financing mechanism. Is this going to affect, for instance, how many arrests that we are going to have, or is it going to make our arrest number go up? And if so, do we have financial basis component in our budget to handle that increased demand that we will have on our budget? Also, this is becoming an increasing problem that we're having in our area. And I would like to see us study also the possibility of looking at a social worker, an embedded social worker in Mill Creek and what we need to do with that as part of this as well. Because I think this is a really serious concern. And I feel like Marysville, when I read through what they had done and I read through their actual ordinance, and they had put out another statement, they have worked at putting in a new social, it looks like they have teamed up for a social worker.
They partnered.
Yeah, to go out, and I would like to see us look at something similar as well, because I feel like that's an important component, because we need to be working on this holistically and covering everything. And I think that was, I'm making sure, I think that was my questions I wanted to see us address on this.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Bond, if you have a comment, if not, Councilmember.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. So one, I support this, obviously, but some of my comments might surprise you. One, I'm somewhat libertarian. I don't want people telling me that I shouldn't eat cheeseburgers or maybe I shouldn't have a can of beer or something like that. And I support adults making decisions for their own life, even if some of us might view those as harmful. And there's a part of me that has been dealing with the public and folks struggling with addiction, and incarceration hasn't been fixing the problem. So I like that this is a gross misdemeanor. I like that it gives an officer the authority to say, I have a crime. Now you need to identify yourself. If you're volatile or dangerous, I can detain you, perhaps in handcuffs, investigate further, identify who you are, because how hard is it to use drugs and never get caught, right? I mean, you should, in theory, could use cocaine, heroin, and all this other stuff in the privacy of your own home with a little bit of common sense, and the cops are never going to catch you. So these people that are getting caught are already doing things that are drawing attention to this. So they're getting caught shoplifting. They're out doing kind of other things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And then being searched incident to another arrest, they're finding drugs and contraband and stuff like this. Some people do get help through the system, through drug courts and things like this. Not all. Some find it through a church group or some other thing. Some finally just get sick and tired of being in and out of jail and struggling with their addiction and find other paths. This is a complicated problem. The embedded social worker is a good idea in principle, but I will tell you that what I have seen is very, very minimal positive results from this embedded social worker. I've brought the embedded social worker to my homeless camps, and I get homeless people screaming at us that you can't make me stop living how I want to live. And I've had only a very small handful of people take advantage of the services, and a small percentage of them seem to have any amount of success in moving on to something better. This is a really complicated problem, and there are no easy answers. If there were, we'd have already fixed it. I have compassion for people struggling with addiction, but I also can tell you that the folks with limited resources that are struggling with addiction are also involved in a lot of other activity that's burglary, car prowl, shoplift, stolen cars, assaults on other folks, typically homeless type issues. Wealthier people struggling with addiction aren't put in a position to have to do that. It's a little different, but it's addiction nonetheless. I have compassion for them both. I support this because it gives our officers tools to help these people. I also want our officers to continue to use good discretion and good judgment. The whole reason nobody who let's just say for the sake of this discussion, that this gal bought these pants and accidentally had some narcotics that she was completely unaware of from the secondhand store. She should not have been convicted of any crime, obviously. That she should have been able to go before the courts, present her case. Everybody sees the light and goes, oh boy. The police should be vetting these. And I can tell you, we do vet a lot of these on the road. I've had situations where I've come across narcotics in a car. I can't prove who owns it. There's 2, maybe 3 people in the car. Everybody's going, not me. Okay, we're just going to dispose of this and we're not going to charge anybody. So when police do make bad decisions, then we get bad decisions in the courts to overcome them. So it's on our police officers on the street to use discretion, good judgment, vet these situations to the best of their ability, and then make reasonable cases, working with the prosecutor to make a good case, a fair case. Nobody that accidentally got some drugs in somebody else's pants that they just happen to be wearing that day should be charged with a felony. Thanks for bringing this, Vince.
Thank you, Mark. Councilmember Morgan.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up. I hate to get too personal, but this is a topic that I'm very close with. My father, as wonderful as he was to me, struggled with opiate addiction until his dying day. The best man at my wedding is a recovering addict, and I saw firsthand how addiction can wreak havoc on families and tear them apart. I've also seen how when people receive the proper help that they do need, that these families can be saved. And I think this type of legislation gives the tools we need to help people in their moment of crisis. Thanks.
Before I get back to Vince, anyone else who hasn't spoken like to say anything? Prosecutor Krebs?
Yeah, I was just going to briefly, obviously this is, I think, just opening the discussion, but Mayor Pro Tem Vignal had a couple questions in terms of finances. There might be an additional city cost for testing of the controlled substances for cases that were charged. I asked Chief Young earlier today, I think it was, an idea of how many cases he might see coming. Cases that in previous years were sent up for felony review. I think he presented a couple of weeks ago, but I think it's about a dozen cases a year-ish. So not a huge impact. Social worker, we talked a little bit about already. I've seen them work. I've seen them move heaven and earth, and then have somebody back on the streets using the second they break contact. And in terms of state action, yeah, there's 2 bills right now in the state house, or one in the state house, one in the Senate. One of which is simply adding the word knowing to 6954-013. If that passes, then that would be the controlling law of the state. So local ordinances would be still technically on the books, but basically preempted by the state law. And then there's House Bill 1499, which is the other side of the spectrum, which is the decriminalization and treatment bill, which is being talked about down in Olympia. So if that passes, that would also probably preempt any local decision. But right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. Technically, the Blake opinion is still subject to either reconsideration or appeal. But as for right now, it's the law of the land.
Well, just to clarify that, so if it's the law of the land, would our police officers have to prove that there was a knowing intent? So would they have to, without us taking action to adopt an ordinance?
No, if we don't do anything right now, they've just simply ruled it's an unconstitutional law. So part one just is really, you can just erase it out of the statute and doesn't exist anymore. So
Okay.
if we wanted local action, we need a local ordinance, and also just giving law enforcement the tools to make contact and investigate certain situations. Because right now, since the law is unconstitutional, simple possession isn't a crime, so it's not even probable cause to contact someone that, you know, is as Councilman Bond mentioned, you know, these simple possession cases are oftentimes the reasons you initiate conduct or contact, and then that can grow into, you know, any number of type of criminal investigation. But as of right now, simple possession is not currently criminalized, so no probable cause to contact or arrest.
Thank you for that clarification. Seeing no other hands, Councilmember Cavallari, before I wrap it up and give you a final word.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor, too, for your input here. And before, I've got a couple of things to say really quick to kind of tie it up. But I see Chief Young is on here too. I'd like to get have him opine on this a bit. The gross misdemeanor law, what this will do for us is create a bridge, right? Just like the prosecutor said, the state law or statute, if they ever get around to it, and honestly, I just don't really see it happening. All that does would preempt anything we do here. So like I said, taking action now doesn't really harm or hinder anything. The second was the cost. Just like the prosecutor said, testing, and I had that here too, because I consulted with some of the members in Marysville. It's minimal. One important thing we sometimes forget is that community policing and having our guys out there and the opportunity to make contact, detain somebody for drugs. This is really, I think, what this is about, besides the criminal piece of it, because you have to have a hammer. Besides the criminal piece of it, this is the humanitarian piece of it, of getting someone off the street, and whether it's a night in jail to wake them up, or it's a first interaction, and even the mom addicted to OxyContin being caught while she's driving or under the influence. These first points of contacts are abundantly necessary. So turning a blind eye to it and just saying, just like prosecutor said, poof, it doesn't exist anymore, does more harm than good. And that's why I said this decision, to me, it seems so ill-conceived. So it really boggles the mind. But the prosecutor's still on here, it's going to have the overcharging effect. I've already seen it. Chief Young, can you maybe touch on
Vince? We're not going to get into a detailed discussion. We're not going to take action tonight. What I'd like to do, we've got 2 weeks till our next meeting. That gives us some time for the chief to come back to us with a more detailed presentation on his thoughts. We may be farther down the road to see what the legislature is doing. We can get some more information on the potential impacts. We'd like to look at what Marysville has done, see what other cities have done. And I think we'll have a lot more information, get a more detailed presentation, and have a discussion of whether we want to move forward that night or where we're at then. But I've heard a consensus that we want to move forward and consider this, but let's get some more information rather than belaboring it tonight, because we're not going to make a decision on it tonight.
Right, so can we have, can you give direction to Grant if we have bobbleheads to have a ordinance prepared? I've already prepared something. I took out the social worker piece because of the cost piece. The social worker piece is effective with mental health, not so much with the drugs. So that's why it was redacted. And
Well, let the Mayor Pro Tem and I talk with the city manager on Thursday of whether or not we have one, or if there's another alternative that we want to consider and discuss at the next meeting in 2 weeks. So we can work out that detail. But yeah, the consensus is, what I heard is we want to move forward with considering this. So I think Grant and Michael heard the input and questions that you all had and the information that some of us want to see, so we can really make an informed decision on what we do and how we move forward. So, and we have 2 weeks till the next meeting. So I think it gives us plenty of time to gather this information.
thank you.
That sound good?
That's fine.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council member.
Move on as soon as I get my iPad back up and running. Okay. With that, we're on to the consent agenda. This evening is item G, approval of checks number 63155 through number 63212 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $1,289,791.74. The audit committee was myself and Councilmember Morgan. I had no exceptions.
No exceptions here as well.
Item H, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $256,555.35. I did not have any exceptions.
No exceptions as well.
And council, the meeting minutes of our March 9th regular meeting.
I have a question on those.
No question. Would you like us to pull the minutes from the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so item.
Actually, no.
We can't have a discussion on the item, so it's either pulled and we'll put it onto the next agenda, or we will pull item I and we can deal with it at the next meeting.
You know what? Go ahead. And I'd like to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as it's written?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did anyone abstain? The consent agenda is approved. On to reports. A few items that I will cover. We had our second coffee with the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem last Tuesday evening. It was an improvement over the last time. We had more advance notice and a little more participation, so it is growing. I'm not going to get into the discussion of what was discussed because some of the items that we said we'd follow up on, the city manager and staff are going to follow up with in their reports in a few minutes. So there were some questions that we told the public we'd get the answers to. The second item has three subcomponents. We had our monthly mayor's meeting on Monday. There was three topics of conversation. One was the Recovery Act, which Ms. Gimzo is going to brief us on in a little more detail in just a few minutes. But the discussion was, I think all the cities are kind of in the same spot, trying to get a handle on what we have coming and what we can use it for and what we might use it for. Sounds like a lot of the cities did grant programs similar to what we did with the first round of funding. So part of the discussion that Mayor Franklin from Everett is discussing with the city or with the county executive is whether there is some opportunity to set up grant programs where the county, without portions of the $160 million that they'll be getting from the Recovery Act, could be used as some kind of matching program for our local businesses. There's also discussion, some cities have used the funds to provide rent and utility and mortgage relief to people who are struggling during the downturn. So it's quite a bit of discussion on just ideas for how cities are utilizing the funds. The second, and this is an area I'll ask the city manager and city attorney to follow up with for us in 2 weeks, but as you know, we moved to phase 3 here yesterday, and things are starting to open up. Mayor Gregerson from Mukilteo referenced that and I haven't found it, but there apparently is some more guidance on open public meetings. No cities are yet moving to live meetings, and the guidance that she was referring to talked about, where are my minutes here? Make sure I get it right, or my notes. You'd be limited to 50% capacity of your city hall. You can't have more than 10 people closely grouped. And if you exceed your capacity limits of your room and don't have an electronic option for the meeting, you'd have to stop the meeting. It's essentially what I heard, but so I haven't seen the guidance, but those discussions are ongoing. And so in the coming weeks, you know, the other cities talked about the same issues we've talked about of how to provide both options, how to provide a live component for people who don't feel comfortable, whether they're council members, staff, or members of the public coming down to City Hall, but still having an option for them participating in the meeting. So those discussions are picking up, and I assume they'll continue to pick up as more and more people get vaccinated here in the coming weeks and months. And then the final issue is one that I need a little direction, some bobbleheads on. Mayor Franklin brought this up. As you recall from our budget discussions last year, state law currently and for the last couple of decades has placed a 1% limit on property tax increases per year, which, as we know, our costs are rising at far more than 1% a year. There is a bill pending, House Bill 1362, which would change state law to eliminate the 1% cap and instead tie the limit or tie the property tax increase to population and inflation with a maximum cap of a 3% increase. And it's not mandatory. It gives local jurisdictions the option whether to do that. And Mayor Franklin is intending to circulate a letter supporting consideration of the bill and is going to be asking mayors to sign on. And so I wanted to throw that issue on the table. It's not a decision I'm going to make of whether or not I sign that letter on behalf of the city. But the bill, I'm not sure what its prospects are to actually get past this session, but it is still alive and it would provide local jurisdictions the option of considering slightly higher property tax increases that may be more in line with the cost increases that we see on an annual or biannual basis. So that is the one issue that I need a little thought and direction from the other six of you. Councilmember Cavallari?
Thank you, Mayor. Why would this, well, I understand why they're trying to have us sign on to this, but we already have a bank capacity. So the 3% is, I don't understand. It seems pretty redundant.
I have not seen, the one issue that Cassie brought up is she wanted to submit a letter, but she hasn't drafted the letter yet. That issue came up and I'm not sure how it would be addressed. I've not had a chance to analyze the bill to see how it deals with the bank capacity and whether or not that bank capacity would be part of the limit of the 3% increase or not. So I don't have that answer.
I think personally, I would probably need to see that for my digestive process.
Any other thoughts? I see a couple of heads nodding to that.
That makes sense. I agree with that. Would like a little bit more information on that as well. I see where you're coming from, and I do like the idea of having the option. Always like having the option if need be, but it's something we're all going to try to not pull that lever, but I'd like to see if we actually have to even go down that road first.
Councilmember Bond?
Thank you, Mayor. Washington state voters passed an initiative that said they wanted the taxes limited to 1%. So I support the decision of the voters. We have an option of a utility tax. If we can make a compelling argument that our service needs exceed our revenues, we can consider that. That won't be supporting an increase in the property taxes and overriding the will of the people.
Oh, I am not hearing an overwhelming desire for me to jump in and sign on into a letter that I haven't even seen yet. So I will take that as enough direction. So thank you for that input. Those were the items that I had on my report for this evening. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. First, you already mentioned the coffee chat, and I know the city manager is going to address this issue. So I'll just say that the coffee chat was great, and it was really nice to see those of you who came out and to hear what you have on your minds. And thank you. Also, Mayor, I wanted to mention too, you mentioned to Rep. Lovick and Rep. Berg about the culverts, and I wanted to let everyone know that I was at another meeting where State Senator Hobbs's LAs were both there last week, and I'm losing my voice. I brought up to them that our concerns to make sure when he's working on that transportation bill that we are very concerned about the unfunded mandate on the culverts. And he said that he is hearing it from everywhere and that he is aware, or they said that he's aware. And so he's working on that. Also, I had a quick question that maybe we can address next time. I know we were starting to look at hiring some new engineers, and I was wondering, I know that when we were discussing the crosswalk, last time, one of the things was that we needed to have, we're hoping to get a new engineer on before we could move forward with the crosswalk. So I was just wanting to check on how the crosswalk at the school was going and if we have started that process with the crosswalk yet. Also, there's a possibility that I may not be at our next meeting. So I was hoping that maybe since the drug possession bill is extremely important, if it could be on the 13th instead, since I may not be here for that meeting, I would like to be a part of that discussion because it's extremely important.
Well, since you said you might not be there, let's see where we're at in a few days and we can talk about that.
And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Bond, any report tonight? Councilmember
No report.
Councilmember Steckler, any report?
Yes, I do have quite a few items here. I just want to go over quickly. First of all, 2 weeks ago, we brought up the idea of a Mill Creek, City of Mill Creek and Kiwanis Club of Mill Creek electronic recycling event. Having received no backlash from that, the city has moved ahead with the Kiwanis Club, and we are going to be doing a citywide electronic recycling program on Sunday, May 2nd. And the marketing department is working on preparing all the materials for promotion. And that will happen in the City Hall North. I just wanted to mention that is moving ahead. Item number 2, on the meeting minutes for the city manager, I'd like to request that in all future meeting minutes, whenever there is a request from a city council member for a follow-up item, could we make sure that that is captured in the meeting minutes? Any request or question or follow-up from a city council member, could we make sure that's captured in the minutes? Not to say that the questions don't get answered, I just want to make sure they're captured in the minutes, that it's reflected in there that a council member did ask for something. Just want to make sure we do that. Item number 3, kind of a follow-up to that. I'd like to thank Laurel Gimzo, our finance director. She did answer all of my questions on the financial budgets, which was publicly brought up in one of these meetings, and questions were answered. So I want to let the public know she did. All those answers were compiled for me. Changes have been made to rectify the budgets. Everything's great. Thank her for that. And also let her know that I am looking very forward to when she's going to get all of us on the council our budget books on the new biennium budget. Looking very forward to that. That's a request also to be captured in the minutes. Let's see, item number 4. I would like to request an item on the agenda for future couple meetings, but I would like the council and the city manager, all of us, to have a discussion about the marketing communications plan for the city and the future of a communications or marketing director. I'd like to know where the city manager is at on that. And I know we're pushing ahead with our one individual, but I think we're definitely, I'd like to revisit the discussion of how we're going to fill that position and understand from the city manager what his plans are. Just have a dialogue about it. So I request that. I think we're going to discuss this in a couple of minutes, but I also wanted to get a request on the criteria for the next wave of stimulus money, which Actually, I think it would be, I'm going to change that request to, I'd like to take up our legislator Berg on her offer of giving us those buckets of the defined elements of the stimulus fund. So we have an idea of how they, maybe you're actually going to go over this, but how the stimulus money is allocated or what's the right word? Targeted. And my last request is I'd like to get an update. 2 meetings ago, we talked about extending the city closure again until April. And I know that council member Cavallari mentioned that he was very clearly wanted to see about us reopening that. And depending on where we're at when that time comes up, I think it'd be a good idea to give a little advance notice to ask the city to come back, the city manager to come back to us with an update on what's the plan on reopening passports and the city's, I don't want to call it a daycare center because I think it's the wrong term, but what do we call it? There's another term for it, but child care.
Preschool pals.
Preschool pals, thank you. Preschool pals. I'd just like to get an update on that. What's the plan going forward? When do you think it is? I think that's a question a lot of people have on their minds now that we're starting to see phases opening up, and they'd like to know. It might be 6 months down the road. It might be 2 weeks down the road. I don't know, but I'd like to see that brought up as well. Thank you. That's it.
John, a couple things, just as you know, most of those items were items that came up in the coffee talk that as I said at the coffee talk, I was going to ask the city manager to follow up on the meeting, and he's going to in his report. As to the minutes, we need to have a conversation with Grant, or I will have that conversation. We can't, by one member, demand something be put in the minutes, because I have a question. If we put in requests, do we need to then put in the responses in the following meeting? So we need to have a discussion with the city attorney about what is appropriate and inappropriate in the minutes. So
that was a request. I would like to request that we add meeting minutes.
Fair
So,
enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
Queuing it up.
Councilmember Cavallari, any report tonight?
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Briles, any report?
No report, Mayor. Just one. Sorry that my computer blue screened on me in the middle of that last discussion. It was really interesting, and then all of a sudden, Councilmember Bond was beatboxing. So
He does that often.
He does that a lot.
Councilmember Morgan, any report tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple reports. I went to the RIA 8 or virtually meeting this past week. They discussed a number of the bills that we've discussed before, such as HB 1117, 1099, 1382, 1172, 1216, and SB 5273 and 5220, all of which are ecology-based and have passed the first round of voting. They updated their report, the first one since 2017, showing that some progress has been made, but there's still a lot of work to do. And in that report, they did talk about our North Creek and the needs that they have determined for it, which aren't insurmountable, but they include riparian efforts for the tree canopy and adding wood volume to the rivers, which might be the types of items we have to add to our plan if this gets passed. In addition, I went to the Planning Commission, where there was one bill in the Senate, SB 6617, that was passed. That one changed the definition of accessory dwelling units, which are units attached to a home, such as a mother-in-law unit or a rental unit. They increased the maximum size from 600 square feet to 800 square feet. And they removed the parking requirements waiving that for those that are within a quarter of a mile of a major transit line. So that's something that the Planning Commission's working on for our own code and will be sending to us in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Morgan. And with that, we will move on to the city manager's report and staff reports.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I did have a chance to capture what was presented at the coffee chat. And many of the questions that were asked also individually mirror those that were presented at the coffee chat. So let me just go through these. First of all, there was an inquiry that the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem had asked me to pay attention to relating to whether the city of Mill Creek has a contract for addressing the bugs, I think was the term that was used, that have persisted with the city's website. The short answer is yes, we do. It's with a entity called Civic Live. I've spoken to our IT director about the query, and I will tell you that since I came here, I've been hearing about complaints relating to this website, concerns about the search engine, and a number of other technical issues that I believe with modern web search engines and web design, this should be a thing of the past. But to the extent the city has made the investment in this particular website, what we are attempting to do is address the concerns as they come up. And we would ask that the community and the council, if there are any concerns that you have, to please direct those to our IT director, or excuse me, our IT manager. And while we are doing this, we're also looking at a parallel process that frankly, when the website was down recently, we discussed internally that it just feels that we're vulnerable to what might potentially happen. And so what we've done is really, with some ingenuity, we're looking at a process for redundancy that's cost effective. We already have a provider of software. It's provided in iCompass. iCompass has been a long underutilized software program for the city that for those of us that are now paying attention to it, and that includes the entire management team, we think it's an untapped powerhouse that not only for the consent agenda, but for other council uses, but also for the public. We're looking at a build out of a public portal, and that work is already well underway. That doesn't necessarily depend on whether or not the bugs are ever able to be fixed in the current website or not, but will be alongside a redundant process. They're currently scheduled and slated for this to be introduced to City Council in our last session in April. We're developing it out now. We're going to be testing it internally with our management team, and then we want to bring it to City Council. We're trying to do this in a cost-effective way. The easiest thing for us to do is to just spend more money, but we don't think that that is wise, particularly what we're looking at with our trends. Please recall that our budget that was approved last year contemplated, for example, that we would have the passport office open on January 1. That simply has not happened. And so we continue to take a conservative view with how we spend our money, either with regard to an overhaul of a website or even the hiring of additional positions that are provided for in the budget. But we think we need to proceed cautiously. So with regard to the website, yes, there continue to be problems with it. And we continue to work with Civic Live. And we're going to refine the process by which both the public and the council and the community of frequent users can inform us of any additional ongoing problems. But we're also looking to do an overhaul of the public portal that runs alongside the current website and that uses software that the city's already paying for. This is something that we've had the capacity for, and we've just simply not utilized it. And I want to especially recognize our city clerk as well as our IT manager for their resourcefulness in continuing to look at more cost-effective ways for us to get the job done here, particularly under the times we find ourselves in. With regard to the engineering position, I believe at the coffee chat, the question was asked specifically with regard to the stormwater engineer. What I would like to tell you is that both all the city engineer, project engineer, and surface water engineer positions are almost ready for posting. Please recall also that we continue to be under reorganization and working with our, not so new anymore, but our new director, Mike Todd, myself, and a couple of members of our internal team, we have put together job descriptions that we think accurately reflect Director Todd's management imprimatur and what will fulfill his vision for that department. We are expecting these to be posted no later than the middle of this week, which would mean tomorrow. And our goal is to have those up. We have a robust marketing plan to ensure that the folks that come on board understand that we are indeed under new management, and we're going to be working in a way that's both more cost effective, but that can address questions, for example, that Mayor Pro Tem Vignell asked about. What is going on with the crosswalk, and what about some of these other engineering projects that are barely in the concept phase as part of our capital plan. We believe that in some ways you need to slow down in order to speed up. And in regard to these positions, it reflects Director Todd and our management team's best thinking about how we want to reorganize going forward. So those positions will be posted shortly. With regard to the communications position, we aren't budgeted for a communication director position, but what we do want to do is throttle according to the needs of that department. As recently as our current check-in today, as part of our regular meeting with Kristen, who's presently a one-person department. The big throttle for us really is what is enabled, what are we able to do under the various phases. And as we are headed now into phase 3, the chatter, at least amongst those in this business, are that we should plan to be in phase 3 through the end of this year. And so what we're planning for are the needs. And rather than just jumping out and hiring another full-time equivalent, we're evaluating under reorganization what we can do on a project basis and what we can do on less than a full-time basis as we throttle forward. However, there are a number of other communications needs that still need to be fulfilled. I have reached out to see what we can do in a cost-effective manner on a project basis for work as it relates, for example, to our fire contract that's coming up, with the Dobson-Remillard communications piece, and a number of others, so that we can consult similar to the way we're doing now with our HR consultant, who is, as of a couple of weeks ago, is now on board. It's Assure Consulting. We are working presently with our management team in Assure, and we're going to be soon to be doing a rollout to our entire community of internal stakeholders with our employees to be able to reach out to Assure as well. We're looking at a cost-effective project basis, a way in which to address our communication needs, rather than hiring a full-time equivalent presently in that department that would be a part of the management team at the director level. Again, what I want to emphasize is that it would be easier for us to just make the hire and move forward. But I am still very, very guarded about where we're at in terms of our financial outlook, particularly with the premise that we would be able to have revenue from our passport office beginning January 1. We all know that hasn't happened. And I want to really proceed cautiously and conservatively with how we're spending the monies that the council has budgeted for our 2-year period. With regard to the query relating to the American Rescue Plan Act, called the ARPA, as it was foreshadowed. Our finance director, Laurel Ginza, will be talking about that a little bit later. So I'll defer to that now. Another question that Mayor Holtzclaw and Mayor Pro Tem Vignell asked me to address from their coffee chat was, what is the plan for reopening the passport office? It is all we talk about and plan for, because we're eager to get that revenue started. We're developing a calendaring system that will enable people to sign up online, so they'll be by appointment only. So when folks are in our lobby, they're not aggregating in the lobby, but rather out in their vehicles and outside until the time that they're ready to come in. We're working on partitions that will enable us to be as safe as possible. As many of us have already realized, we've modified our HVAC system to what is now at hospital grade quality, to develop a plasma by which we capture the larger particles and the higher micron filtration systems that we've installed, and that also present a hydrogen peroxide compound that I'm not qualified to speak the chemistry, but it's what's released into our air is really hospital grade, hospital quality. So that as we have these stakeholders coming in to conduct their passport business, we will work and assure that our staff are as safe as possible. We're also eager to get as many of our team that are interested in the vaccine to be able to participate in it. There's a concern amongst our workforce about vaccinations before we open the door. And so we're throttling a lot of these concerns with our employment council to ensure that we've provided a safe workplace that's minimizing risk to our employees as well as to the public as a whole. So we do not have a date for the passport office to open, but I can tell you that we're working in earnest. And we already have the partition lines marked out on the floors, and Director Todd and our leader Matthew Combs in the Public Works Department are working aggressively to get that work done. A couple of other matters regarding the Preschool PALS program that is still under analysis. We do not have a calendar date. As I foreshadowed under the budget discussion, there are a number of issues, both in terms of structural infrastructure, as well as risk management that we need to address. In the meantime, what we are looking at, again, are possibilities where we may have partners already in the community that we don't necessarily need to compete with from the private sector that may be able to offer the equivalent of the preschool PALS program. What I've asked right now is for Kristen to direct her attention to a certain triage of work. This is in the queue, it is under analysis, and it's a full interdepartmental approach that we're taking to how we throttle going forward. Again, I want to emphasize it's not business as usual at City Hall. And so as we're working to conserve our finances, we want to ensure that we have a triage that enables us to first and foremost generate revenue for the city, which is the opening of the passport office, the marketing of it, and to do the other things with regard to the other work I've listed ahead of addressing what would be next in terms of chronology. Finally, just real quick follow-up. We're working with Mike Kidd, as you recall, former retired, or is a retired Navy captain. We understand he has made contact with leaders at the USS Ralph Johnson, and we're hoping to come back to council with maybe some general ideas of what the leadership on the Ralph Johnson would find useful and meaningful for them as part of our welcoming them back as part of the host community. So I would ask you to stay tuned for that. With regard to the budget books, in this Thursday's meeting, we are going to be discussing with the mayor and mayor pro tem our proposal for the budget books this year and how they may look different from what was presented in past years. We are aware that there was a lot of copy in those past years. We can clip and paste that. Much of the language may still be relevant, but we believe that what council is really expecting us to pay attention to are the substance of the numbers and the way in which the budget that you have provided with us is going to be executed on behalf of the administrative team. So we're going to have a discussion about that before we dedicate the resources to providing that budget book. I believe I've addressed all of the items. What I'd like is, with council's permission, I would ask Laurel to talk about the ARPA. And then I'm going to introduce the traffic enforcement update from Chief Young after that is concluded.
Michael, before we move on the budget books, since we don't meet for 2 weeks after our meeting on Thursday, I may send out an update to the council so that if they, with what we discussed, just to keep them in the loop of what's coming. So if they have input that I could share with you prior to the meeting in 2 weeks.
Thank you. So the mayor, with your permission, I'll turn the floor over to our finance director, Gimzo, next, and then I'll do a brief introduction before Chief Young speaks.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. The American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, was signed into law on March 11th. So this funding brings a much needed financial assistance to individuals, businesses, and local governments across the nation. The $1.9 trillion bill provides $65.1 billion in aid to cities across the country. So 70% of funds are obligated to cities with 50,000 or more residents, and they're calling these entitled cities. 30% of funds are obligated to cities with less than 50,000 residents, and those are considered non-entitled cities. So the biggest difference here is that the funding that Mill Creek will receive is going to be passed through the state instead of the federal government sending the money directly to us. Grants are calculated based on population size only at this time. So the city of Mill Creek is estimated to get $4,550,847. I do want to note that this is an estimate, not an official value, and is subject to change. So the U.S. Treasury Department will provide final disbursement amounts at a later date. Okay. The funding will begin to arrive in the next couple of months and will be distributed in 2 different pieces. So we'll get the first half here within the next 150 days, and then the second half will come 12 months following the receipt of the first payment. Funding will be available until December 31st, 2024, and any unexpended funds will be returned to the Treasury if they weren't spent. So I think Steckler was asking, cities can use ARPA funds to respond to COVID-19, to the pandemic. They can cover costs incurred from the public health emergency. It can be used to replace lost, delayed, or decreased revenues due to COVID. They can be used addressing the negative economic impacts on local businesses and nonprofits, making necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So we will be working with council to set local priorities for this funding. There are a lot of unanswered questions because this is all preliminary information. The FAQs aren't available yet. And I'm participating in the National League of Cities weekly meetings that cover the ARPA implementation. And I am following the Association of Washington Cities news updates. So we're really early in the process, but I will provide updates as more information becomes available. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Laurel. Mayor, with your permission, I will move on next to Chief Young to give us an update on traffic enforcement.
Michael?
Yes, Mayor.
I'm not sure how long this is going to take, and we have an executive session. So should we, I don't want to interrupt Chief Young in the middle of his presentation. Should we go ahead and extend the meeting now till 9:30?
Yes. I don't know that we'll need all that time, Mayor, but that might not be a bad.
We don't have to use it all for extending the regular meeting and keep us from having to come back for more.
Understood.
Do you need a motion?
Motion to approve.
Yeah, second.
So the record's clear, that was a motion to extend the regular meeting till 9:30, correct?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all. I wasn't tracking the time. Thank you. Approximately about a month and a half ago, I received an inquiry from council informing me that I think it was on the Nextdoor webpage. There was concerns about speeding. I believe it was on Mill Creek Boulevard. I spoke with Chief Young and asked if he could at least pay attention to the concern relating to traffic enforcement. And so Chief Young has really just pulled together a lot of the data that I know is important to council. And I'm also really pleased to inform this council that the emphasis here isn't on ticketing people and issuing fines so much as warning our community to pay attention and heighten their awareness to the need to slow down. And that data is really fleshed out in the initial effort that was made. So without further ado, Chief Young, give us some background, sir, and inform the council on what you have done in light of that request for action. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with this update this evening. Just wanted to take a second and give you some background on where it came from. So I have also received some inquiries from citizens and council members and direction from the city manager with regard to identifying some of the emphasis areas for traffic enforcement and where we might have collisions associated with that traffic enforcement. So we have compiled a comprehensive emphasis patrol area where we are focusing on certain areas within the city where we see the highest volume. We've had our traffic officer, Tony Bittinger, go out and conduct radar assessments and figure out where those particular hotspots are, and we are currently addressing those issues. So I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint thing here for you, and hopefully it'll work correctly. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, so I labeled this particular presentation Traffic Matters because in all reality, traffic matters. Whenever we have some sort of a major incident or event occurring within the city that impairs traffic, the council hears about it, the media hears about it, and what we want to do is start emphasizing why traffic does matter. So with that being said, our department is committed to the safety and security of each member of our community, and we are out there to ensure pedestrian traffic safety, and we want to make sure that everyone gets home safe and gets to and from wherever they're going very safely. So I wanted to give you some background too on just some of the different data that we have. So this is just over the last couple of years. You can see with regard to traffic stops in 2020, we had a pretty significant decrease in both traffic stops and collisions. And we all know that that is definitely related to COVID. We've had a lot fewer people out driving, which has resulted in both fewer traffic stops and fewer collisions. So between January 1st and March 23rd of this year, we've conducted 475 traffic stops, and we've had 70 collisions. So between March 15th and March 23rd, we have conducted 65 traffic stops. Out of those, we've issued 12 tickets and issued 53 warnings and or other education type matters. So with that being said, our emphasis has been much more on education of the community and with regard to driving safely. And we want to make sure that we are putting more of an emphasis on taking care of the issues that are causing that speed effect or causing people to drive recklessly. I've noticed that a lot of people love to just ride your bumper, so we're focusing on those types of matters as well. One of the things that we've done too, so here's the way we're addressing this is by evaluating the data, and we're going to drive proactive enforcement efforts, which means we're looking at that to make sure that we are looking at those proper emphasis areas and applying the correct solutions. We are definitely doing a lot more deployment of our officers to certain areas to conduct the education enforcement. We are going to be developing and disseminating public safety announcements in partnership with the community engagement coordinator. These things will go out to places like the Herald, Mill Creek Beacon, so on and so forth. And we'll even look at trying to put them on our website too. I don't know how that's going to work. And then finally, we're going to be participating in the Target Zero team, which will enable us to work in cooperation with the Washington State Department of Transportation. So in conclusion, we have heard what you have requested, and we have done everything that we can at this point to ensure the safety of members of our community, and we will continue to do so. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone have any questions, comments? Councilmember Steckler.
Chief, thank you.
Can you pull your microphone, or you're hard to, we can't quite hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you for the presentation. Question I had was, one of the things we could do too is just the presence of the officers being out on the streets. How is it? Can you tell me what is the expectation of our officers to be out patrolling on the streets? What percentage of their time is that increasing? I sense since you've come on board that there is an increase in the amount of presence out there, and I was just curious if that's some kind of a change that you've implemented, or could you speak to that?
We have been implementing a number of different measures within the department. So as of right now, we are currently developing certain performance metrics to give a percentage of time that we would like to see officers out there. The challenge that we have with law enforcement is that we have multiple types of data that we have to analyze. We have the quantitative and the qualitative. And meshing those two together is very important because we can't always put a number on everything we do. For example, we can't say how many crimes we've prevented or how many collisions we've prevented. It's just one of those things where sometimes just the appearance with this uniform will deter certain behaviors or modify those behaviors. So that's where we have to start really identifying what certain metrics are. And we're currently in the process of that, Councilman. So I cannot give you a number right now, but I will come back to you later on and let you know what we've come up with as a department so that we can ensure that we are balancing the proactive enforcement with the calls for service that we receive.
That would be great. I just think that the increased presence could also be a deterrent to people driving a little bit safer, a little bit slower, a little bit. There might be a Mill Creek policeman around every corner.
We're certainly pushing for that and pushing for that appearance, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Young, for this presentation. It's very helpful to have this information. And I just want to say, I know sometimes others feel like, or say that they feel like they don't see a police presence, but I want to say that I feel like I see a police presence all the time. And I'm not sure if that just reflects the fact that I'm home and out and about in the community during the day, but I always want to commend you because I feel like I see you drive through my neighborhood. I see you when I'm going down to the grocery store. I see you when I'm going to the doctor. I feel like I see your presence everywhere. And that I always feel like you're out there if I were to need something. So I just want to throw that out there for you and always thank our officers for all their hard work that they do. So thank you.
Thank you. And you might actually see me pull you over too if you do something really wrong. I've done that a couple times already as well.
Been warned.
No speeding.
Counts as your warning.
Chief, thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. Michael, is there anything else on the staff reports this evening?
No, Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Council.
We need to adjourn to an executive session to discuss potential or pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1
Mayor, do we need to do public comment first?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yep.
Before we jump to executive session, audience communication. Who would like to speak to the council? Is Barb trying to find her unmute button?
Yes.
Barb,
My
Barb
hand.
followed by Will. I saw the yellow hand first before I saw Will's actual hand. So Barb, please go ahead.
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast. First, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Matthew Combs and the Public Works Department for getting the senior center sign taken down on Mill Creek Boulevard. Yay, thank you. Second, I want to thank the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem for hosting the second chat with the mayor last week. As noted, it did have better attendance this time, which was great. I would like to see this continue once a month for a while longer, instead of going to the 2 or 4 times a year. I think as we build on this, it gives more people more comfort to speak out, I hope. Also, I like the idea of questions being asked without submitting them ahead of time. Spur of the moment answers can be very interesting. And some of us don't prepare that far ahead with our questions to submit them earlier. So just my input. Thank you very much for hosting it.
Welcome. Mr. Nelson, name and address, please.
Will Nelson, 14925 29th Drive Southeast, Mill Creek. I'd like to echo Councilman Steckler's comments on the survey. I remember one time, probably about 10, 11 years ago, the city conducted a survey, and as I walked into the, which is now City Hall North, I was approached by a group of activists. who wanted me to vote for a particular project, which I did not vote for. So his comments were very good. That needs to be watched very, very closely for biases. Second, on speeding, even happened to me here in Mill Creek. Neighbor later hollered at me to slow down, thought I was going too fast. My window was open in my old truck and I looked down and I'm going 25 miles an hour. So I got out of my truck and I told her I was going 25 miles an hour. People have no idea what speed is. They look at something and if it's too fast, they think it's too fast, they will make a complaint. Sometimes it is too fast and they'll complain. But I don't know how many times I've been hollered at for going 25 miles an hour. And so I hope the police department takes those factors into account when they're finishing their report. I assume they will. And lastly, something I hadn't planned to count on, but if the city manager is right and Inslee intends to keep us in lockdown in phase 3 till the end of the year, that is highly unacceptable, extremely unacceptable for what that's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Anyone else?
Melissa.
Melissa, name and address, please.
Melissa Luque, 13513 31st Drive. Thank you so much. I really appreciated the coffee chat with the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, and I really appreciate the city manager's timely response to a lot of the questions that we had. It was very helpful. I actually stayed on to comment specifically because I'm very excited, just to share. I was talking with, I want to clarify, I am on the Parks and Recreation Board. I'm the current chair, and I just found out today that we got 10 applicants for our one opening. That's amazing. I think that shows that when you post and share, because I know there was a lot of sharing for this position, for this opening, that it's that we get the type of response and feedback that's needed. I'm very excited for the community involvement and interest, and I'm sad that there's only one opening, but it's in relation to also the survey results that you're getting, that when you are reaching out to the community in this way proactively, there shows. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and that was it. Oh, and a big thank you to Kristen Rasmussen, which I know we've heard her name multiple times today in today's meeting, but she really, I don't know how she's doing everything that she's doing, and on a timely manner, as like working with me on the board. So just thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone else this evening? Hearing no further audience communication, now we will adjourn to executive session. We will not take action when we conclude. Michael and Grant and Catherine, how much time do you think we will need?
Mayor, let's start with 20 minutes.
So we'll do 20 plus 2. In quick nature calls. So it is 8:32 by my watch, so we will reconvene at 8:54. Is my math correct? I'm poor at math. Well, I went to law school. Okay, so we are gonna go off into another virtual room until 8:54, and we will either extend or return.
Council has extended executive session till 9:09 p.m.
Yo, baby, who's the first one back, huh? Oh, beat you, Adam. That's about the only time I'll ever win a race is when it's electronic.
Is everyone
By
here?
the miracle of modern technology, we recess the executive session at 9:08 and my clock just turned 9:09 and we'll adjourn the meeting and see you the first week of April. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.